Okay, so we looked at some examples of common factoring. Now we're going to look at an example where we are factoring a trinomial. This means that they don't have anything in common, but there is a way of factoring it so that it looks like two binomials that are being multiplied. So just like common factoring is the opposite of the distributive property, this would be the opposite of doing FOIL or binomial expansion. So the strategy here is I want it to be two terms, two binomials that are being multiplied. There's nothing in front of the x squared, so I know that my answer is going to look like this. There's going to be two x's in the front. And then to figure out what numbers go here, I'm going to look at the 9 and the 20. I'm going to look for two numbers that I can add together to get 9, and the same two numbers I want to multiply together to get 20. So I'm going to look at the factors of 20. I know that 1 and 20 are factors. They multiply together. 2 and 10 are factors. 4 and 5 are factors. These multiply together and these multiply together. Once you have your factors listed, ask yourself, which of these can I add together? But it has to be the pairs that actually multiply to make 20. Which of them can I add together to get 9? So 1 and 20, I can't make 9 with them. 2 and 10, I can't make 9 with them, but 4 and 5, I can make 9 with them. So those are going to be what I fill in. 4, 5, 4, 5, because 4 plus 5 is 9. 4 times 5 is 20. They have to be the same number, or the same pair of numbers. So that means positive 4 and positive 5, so that's what I'm going to fill in here. Positive 4 and positive 5. And that's it. That's my final answer. And you can do expansion to test whether it was correct. Or you can go back to the expansion video if you're not sure. Okay, next example. Okay, so I'm always first checking to see if they have anything in common, any common factors to factor out. There are none. So I'm going to do trinomial factoring. So again, I know that my final answer is going to look like this. It's going to have x's here. I'm just looking for these two other numbers. So I know that when I add them, they have to give me the middle number. And when I multiply them, they have to give me the outer number, or the last number here. You can also think of it like the coefficient here is a. So we're looking at two numbers that we add together. Blank plus blank gives us B, and blank times blank gives us C. And it has to be the same two numbers. So if it's R and S, has to be R and S over here. Okay, so here I'm looking for two numbers that I can add to get 5 and multiply to get negative 14. Always start with looking at which numbers you can multiply because there's fewer options there. With the addition, you have an infinite number of possibilities. Like I could have 100 and negative 95. It goes on. But here I'm more limited to the second part, so that's where I'm going to look. So I'm going to look at which numbers I can multiply to make 14. If it's easier for you to write it out like this, you can. So you can look at it like 1 times 14, 2 times 7, and actually that's it. But I know that it has to be a negative 14, which means that one of the numbers has to be negative. Now that I know which numbers I can multiply to make 14, I'm going to check which of these add up to make 5. So -1 and 14 give us 13, so that doesn't work. 1 and -14, that gives us -13, so that doesn't work. 2 and -7 give us -5, but here, -2 and 7, that gives us +5. So this is our answer. That's what I'm multiplying and adding. So -2 and 7, -2 and 7, and that's what I'm going to fill in over here. -2, +7. All right, example C. X squared minus 13x plus 22. So I'm looking for two numbers that add up to give me the middle coefficient. And the same two numbers I need to multiply to give me 22. So I'm going to think about the factors of 22. So to get 22, I can go 1 times 22, or -1 times -22. I can go 2 times 11, or -2 times -11. And then I'm going to look, okay, well, which of these can I add to get -13? So this gives me 23, this gives me 13, this gives me -23, and this gives me -13. So that's what I'm going to, those are my two numbers. That's what I'm going to use. So it is -2 and -11, -2 and -11. So I know that in factored form, I'm going to have two sets of brackets, x and x, because it's a simple trinomial. There's nothing in front of x squared. And I'm going to insert -2 and -11. And it's the same two numbers for both. Last example, 6p squared plus 30x minus 24. So I'm going to look for, first I'm going to see, can I common factor? And just by looking at it, I notice that 6 goes into 6, 6 goes into 30, and 6 goes into 24. Like I said before, if your multiplication skills aren't where they need to be, then you can list the factors if that helps. So 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. For 30, the factors are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. And for 24, the factors are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So we notice that the greatest common factor, the biggest number there, is 6. So that means the GCF is 6. So that's what I'm going to factor out. I'm going to bring the 6 to the front, and then left over in brackets, I'm going to divide each term by 6. And I'm left with 6p squared divided by 6 is p squared. 30x divided by 6 is 5x. And -24 divided by 6 is -4. Okay. So now if I wanted to factor what was left over inside, I have a p here and I have an x here. Those are two different variables, which means I can't do anything further. To be honest, that was a typo, but teachable moment that if the variable isn't the same for both of them, there's nothing we could have done. If it had been the same, so let's say I factored it and it was 6p squared plus 5p minus 4, then I would needed to have found two numbers that add up to make 5 that I can multiply to make -4. So I would look for the factors of -4. So because it's negative, I know that one factor needs to be negative and the other positive, because positive times negative gives us a negative number. So I know that the factors need to be negative for this reason. So negative 1 times 4, or 1 times negative 4. Negative 2 times 2, or, I mean, it's the same thing, 2 times negative 2. And that's it. And then I'm going to see, okay, well, which of them add up to give us positive 5? So this gives us negative 3. Sorry, positive 3. This gives us negative 3, 0, and 0. None of them work, which means I can't do anything further. The only thing, even if they had been the same variable, the only thing that I could have done was factor out the 6, and then this part here is not factorable. So that's why questions will sometimes say factor if possible, because it's not always possible. Okay, so if with the typo, this would have been the answer. Without the typo, this would have been the answer.